It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. Puerto Rico has canceled a controversial contract to repair its devastated power grid. The Montana-based firm Whitefish Energy was given a $300 million no-bid deal. Whitefish has deep Trump ties. It's based in the hometown of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke and also has deep connections to a Trump campaign donor. Last week, a public outcry erupted after the contract was leaked. One of its clauses says that in no event shall government bodies have the right to audit or review the cost and profit elements. I'm joined now by the reporter who broke the story about this contract for the Daily Beast. Ken Klippenstein joins me now. Welcome, Ken. So, first of all, you obtained this contract and made it publicly known. After that, there was a lot of controversy. Many outlets picked it up. And then a few days later, the contract was canceled. Can you explain to us what the contract said?
What the contract showed was that there were huge cost overlays. People were being paid, over $100 a day, just in not even including food or lodge. Food, maybe $80 a day. If you look at the cost of, say, a helicopter flight, that was like $1,500 or $2,000. I spoke to a professional helicopter pilot who said that those prices were over double what they should be. And so in addition to the, kind of outrageous prices, it also showed that there was very little in the way of enforcement to make sure that this private firm actually carried out the work. There was a way for them to not have to follow a certain timeline. There was no specific, deadline for getting this work done. And in addition to that, there was, serious limits to just the kind of basic oversight that you would think would apply when there are federal tax dollars being used for a recovery response.
Yeah, so explain that. So there's that provision that I read that bars an audit, including of the profit elements. What does that mean, and how does that compare to other contracts? Is it usually built into a contract that it can't be audited when it's a contract offered by the federal government?
No, that's not supposed to be how it is. In fact, FEMA is supposed to exercise pretty tight oversight in any sort of disaster response when federal tax dollars are being used, much less one where $300 million in federal tax dollars are being used. And the money is just one part. The other part is the majority of Puerto Ricans are still without electricity. I was speaking to one Puerto Rican whose family has to use a kiddie pool to shower because they don't have running water yet. So in addition to these huge cost overlays, lack of oversight, it doesn't appear that they're getting the attention and kind of response that they need.
Let's talk about this firm, Whitefish, that was, until you exposed their contract, was going to be tasked with this huge job of repairing the power grid. You report in your piece that it appears that their parent company only had 2 full-time employees?
That's correct. At the time that Hurricane Maria, the hurricane that ravaged Puerto Rico, touched down, they literally only had 2 full-time employees. In addition to that, they're only 2 years old, have very little experience with these kind of crises. There are many firms, on the other hand, that did have experience with these kinds of things. So when taken in the aggregate, I think it's reasonable to question, why did they get this enormous contract?
So what do you think the answer is? I mean, you also point out that they have deep ties to the Trump campaign.
So I did some digging through campaign contribution reports from the FEC, and what I found was that there's a very high level Trump donor based in Texas named Joe Colonnetta, who donated the maximum amount to Trump's primary campaign during the presidential election, donated the maximum amount to his general election campaign, donated the maximum amount to the Republican Party during that year. And then if you go back through previous years, donated huge sums of money to the Republican Party generally, including Rick Perry, who's now in the Trump cabinet. And I went through their social media and found that Joe Colonnetta and his family, his wife, had photos of themselves at parties with Ben Carson, another Trump cabinet member, Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State. So there are all kinds of connections with the Trump administration. And if you really follow the money, you see that there's big donor money. This individual who gave all this money, this is the number one financier of Whitefish. So that's where the connection's at. And in addition to that, you have the fact that the firm is based in a very small town in Whitefish, Montana, which is where Ryan Zinke, President Trump's Interior Secretary, is from as well. So the entire contract seems to be, rife with these connections to the White House. I think that raised serious questions about if there was a political motive behind this contract.
Right. Now, you point out in your piece, too, for the Daily Beast, that it's not as if Whitefish was going to be doing the heavy repair work itself. It was effectively going to be a middleman to hire the actual contractors who were going to do the hard labor. But there are questions about then why a small firm based in Montana would be needed to be paid $300 million to do that.
That's exactly right. If you look at it, they subcontracted out a ton, I think a majority of the work. And so I was speaking with one representative from the Puerto Rican Congress, and what he told me is, why do we need middlemen if we can just have, which is, so typically in disaster responses, they come up with what are called mutual aid agreements between various public utilities that exist. This is unusual in that, they went to these private firms.
Ken, on the point of private firms in a broader sense when it comes to Puerto Rico, the big fear amongst many people is that this would be a classic case of disaster capitalism, firms preying on the devastation of the island to profit off of it. You've been covering Puerto Rico for a while now, and you've been looking at this angle of it. Your thoughts on the overall state of disaster capitalism in Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria?
Well, I have to agree with the Puerto Rican congressman I was speaking with. Why can't they just go straight to the public utilities? Why can't they just go straight to the workers? Why do they need to have this private firm that's going to take a cut of the money, determine who they hire, apparently charge way more for it, and not get the work done on time?
We'll leave it there. Ken Klippenstein, whose reporting exposed the contract, which fueled the outcry that led to the cancellation of the contract. You can find his writings at sites including the Daily Beast. Ken, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.